AMD stock is definitely not the next Nvidia. As we can see year to date, and AMD is down roughly 7%, while Nvidia is up over triple digits. Now, two things can be true. While I do believe AMD is not the next Nvidia, I also believe that AMD is sitting at super duper attractive prices. And I want to explain why AMD not being the next Nvidia is not a bearish case that investors should be worried about. So let's take a closer look in today's episode. But first, make sure to hit the thumbs up. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, as this is going to be the best place you're going to find any semiconductor AI news in general for free. Also, check out my special offer at fool.com/Jose and check out my free newsletter at What the Chip Happened, where I do daily newsletters.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
Now, on today's episode, we're going to start off here with AMD, but first, let me explain for the new viewers who I am. So my name is Jose Najarro. I am an electrical engineer. Got my bachelor's and master's degree in this space, and I used to work for a lot of emerging and innovative tech companies. And because of that, because of my background and because of all my desire and motivation to learn about finances, I become a semiconductor investor and have done really well. I mean, my biggest position is Nvidia, and I'm talking about the low double digits average cost basis for Nvidia, and purchasing price way ahead of that. Obviously, cost bases are a little bit different, like I mentioned. And for AMD, very similar. AMD is a stock that I've been in since the low single digits. So this is the niche that I personally like to invest in. I know a lot about the semiconductor space. I know how this is kind of transforming the technology, and where I feel comfortable making heavy investments. If I don't feel comfortable, I usually end up investing in either ETFs or certain other industries I also like to invest in. But if they don't fall within this tech AI space, just tech space in general, I tend to kind of do smaller plays. But Nvidia is my number one position, super happy by that. And my second biggest position is AMD. The reason I wanted to mention that is because many believe that the only people investing in AMD are those that missed out on the Nvidia gains. And that's not far, and that's nowhere near true to my overall standing, but it could be for others. The second thing is, investing in AMD also doesn't mean that you have to be bearish for Nvidia. Like I mentioned at the intro of this episode, I nowhere near think AMD is the next Nvidia. I think Nvidia is going to continue to win. I have no thoughts of selling my Nvidia shares right now, but as where I want to put my money in right now, I personally would put it in AMD, then Nvidia. Obviously, maybe my portfolio might make me a little bit biased, as my number one position is super huge compared to my number two position, so maybe that's controlling a little bit my bias. But right now, the stock prices of AMD being $127, we're going to look at forward PE ratios. I think AMD is one I want to go in very heavy in, and gonna buy during these levels in the next few days, in the next few weeks, if we maintain these levels. So like I mentioned, two different companies. Nvidia in the past 5 years has gone up over 2,000%, while AMD has only gone up over 200%. Both doing amazing, but obviously we can see Nvidia is killing it. But normally the big convergence happened here during the AI space, and rightfully so. Now, if you want to know the bearish cases for AMD, and I think it's very important to understand the bearish cases, Bank of America recently lowered their AMD stock rating and AMD stock price, and they mentioned a lot of weaknesses and kind of bearish thesis, and I believe these are the most common when it comes to AMD. The first kind of big comment is AMD is so far behind Nvidia, and Nvidia is going to continue to dominate the market. I believe that's going to be true. The second thing they mentioned is, while Nvidia is going to dominate the market with roughly 80% of accelerator share or AI chips, the next in line is going to be custom chips, which is 10 to 15%. And I do believe custom chips are also going to be a big player. Those are companies like Broadcom and MRVL. Again, I am very excited about this because these are stocks that I enjoy, right? I enjoyed Nvidia earlier on because I saw the overall demand in data center. Obviously, no one saw the AI space, but investing in data center really helped me grow my position in Nvidia many years ago. This past year, we invested heavily in Oracle. Oracle was probably my favorite play in the clouding market because they were growing in AI infrastructure and they were starting with such a small base. I believe Oracle is actually overperforming in a year-to-date basis, is overperforming the other clouding places. And I'm going to keep this even if I'm wrong. I haven't really checked it. So let's look at Google and Amazon, even with the huge drop in Oracle. So, yep, Oracle is outperforming those three players, even though when I did my video on my top 3 AI stocks for 2024, many people would not see why I chose Oracle over the other players. And right now, that seems to be playing the case. And then my final one was MRVL. MRVL is one that I really have been pretty excited about in the semi-custom AI chip, and the stock is up roughly 6%. So I'm not saying I know all the stocks, but when it comes to semiconductor, the probability of me being right is a little bit higher. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but it's just a little bit higher. And I think my gut right now is telling me AMD is one that I want to go heavy in. And I just want to share my overall thoughts. So they mentioned that Nvidia will get about 80% of the AI accelerator space. Custom chips by Marvell and Qualcomm would get 10 to 15%, with the remaining share being AMD and a range of startups. I think that's going to be true, but I explained why AMDs, even with single-digit market share, can do really well in their own market, and why there is another market that the overall investment community is ignoring. After all these bearish theses, they also believe there's a weakness in the PC space, in the PC client space, in the consumer PC space. So they ended up dropping their price target to $155 from $180, and they reduced their revenue estimates on GPU sales for 2025, where they expect roughly $8 billion, down from 8.9, which is far below the consensus of 9.6. Remember, at the end of this year, and AMD is expected to do roughly $5 billion based on their estimates. I think the numbers are going to be a little bit higher, maybe closer to like 5.2, 5.3, but they are expecting more than $5 billion by the end of this year. So an extra $3 billion by the end of next year, in my opinion, is not impossible, because remember, the AI market is not a market that has a cap right now. The AI market is evolving and continues to grow on a basis, right? It's not the total TAM is increasing, where AMD believes by 2028 this would have a TAM of roughly $500 billion, where last year was roughly $40 billion, right? So a huge TAM growth there. So the market is growing. So I think that's very important to remember, because if the market is growing and AMD can still only get a few single digits in their GPUs, just due to the fact that the market is growing, they will be able to see yearly revenue growth. Now, obviously, there's a lot more to it, but right now, AMD's PE ratio sitting at below 25 for 1 year, which is pretty much the next 12 months, I believe is cheap. I personally believe this is the case. And one of the main reasons for this is I think that AMD doesn't have the same type of expectations as Nvidia. And I believe I've mentioned this in previous streams or other episodes, where think about AMD and Nvidia as two of your kids. And everybody who has kids, you would know, you probably have one kid that you expect a lot from, right? For example, there's a child that I expect always to come home with A pluses, right? No matter what happens. And if that kid comes home with an A or A plus, I'm like, congratulations. I know I expected you to do this. And that's Nvidia, right? That's Nvidia, where you have high expectations and that company delivers. Now AMD is what I would consider the kid that, while they might not come with A pluses every single quarter, they might come with a B here, a B plus, an A minus, and so often. So you don't know what to expect from this kid. You're expecting somewhere around those B average. But I believe AMD in the upcoming quarters, I don't know when, but in the upcoming quarters, is going to surpass our expectations and is going to come out with multiple A plus quarters. And that's going to drive a huge valuation to the stock. especially because his valuation right now on forward PE ratio is roughly 25. And these valuations are obviously based on analyst expectations. And I wanted to kind of see what revenue type of estimations are or expectations are analysts expecting. For this fiscal year, which ends this quarter in about, it's actually ends in December, AMD is expected to have revenue of roughly $25.6 billion. The company in the trailing 12 months, so the past 4 quarters, has done 24 billion. Right now, we are kind of in a growth phase. So 24 billion at 1 quarter, I think this company is going to be able to meet those expectations easily at 25. I think the company is actually going to outperform those expectations based on average estimates. Now, for next fiscal year, this company is expected to have roughly $32.6 billion. So that's a nice jump, and that's a jump of about $7 billion. Now, I think AMD also has the opportunity to beat these estimations as well. And let me kind of explain why in a bit. So first, let's kind of look at those estimations for Nvidia. Nvidia this year and next year is actually expected to add at least $70 billion, while AMD is only expected to add $7 billion. So you can see the huge deep in estimation and expectation difference between AMD and Nvidia. So if Nvidia is able to add $70 billion in forms of AI chips, I believe AMD can easily add an extra $4 billion in AI accelerator next year. And they also have other industries that are pretty strong for them right now. The PC client, they are taking market share from Intel in the PC side and also the CPU server side. Their embedded business is picking back up. And those two can definitely drive an extra $3 billion, in my opinion, next year. So I don't think it's impossible for AMD to meet and beat expectations that analysts have for next year. So overall, I think AMD can beat and meet, and that's great. But I also believe the market is forgetting how good AMD's chips are. While they're not number one, they are getting traction from big tech players. I mean, Microsoft is using the MI300s to power multiple Copilot services and to power GPT-4. We know from OpenAI's recent releases that they still need more computational power. And right now, one of the biggest issues is there is a supply constraint. No matter how much demand there is, there's not enough NVIDIA chips to go around. So if there's not enough NVIDIA chips and you want to continue to grow, you're going to go to number 2, number 3, and number 4 player. So I believe AMD will be able to grow mainly because of this supply constraint market. Next, Meta. Meta is using it for their inferencing infrastructure, mainly for Llama 405B. Again, Meta is a huge player in the AI space, and I believe they're going to continue to invest in AMD solution. Finally, we also see Oracle, a huge AI infrastructure investor, mentioned that they have one of the largest superclusters of AMD MI300 accelerators with over 16,000 MI300X. So while AMD is going to have the number 2 position, I do believe they're going to be able to get market because of the current supply constraints that we see in the AI space. The other thing is many people see the ASIC market as a competition, and this is your custom chips made by MRVL and Broadcom, and they have big customers like Amazon, Microsoft, and all these other players. But Lisa Su, in a conference that happened a few months ago, and let me just say, I don't think anyone has mentioned this except me. And this is why you have to make sure to hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button, as this is going to be the best place you're going to get any semiconductor news. Also, please check out whatthechiphappened.com. Join that newsletter. I'm providing a lot of great information. All right, so back to this video of something that no one else is talking about. A few months ago, Lisa Su was at an investor conference, and the analyst was talking about the ASIC market, or these custom chips, and if Lisa Su saw this as a competitor. And Lisa Su, which is an amazing CEO, right? I believe she is one of the top tier CEOs. Definitely not a Jensen, but definitely one to not mess around with, as she will not take crap from anybody, and she will eat your market if you let her. She did it with Intel, and while I don't think it's going to be easy for her to do it with Nvidia, I believe she's at least making some form of fight to get single digit market share here. But in forms of the ASIC space, she mentions that she doesn't look at the ASIC market as a competition. She actually views it as a partnership because they also have semi-custom capabilities. They've done it with the game console business and great partnerships with Sony and Microsoft. So they believe that in the future, they can be a world where, hey, look, come use our IP and figure out how you want to make it different yourself. So the analyst was a little bit shocked and was like, hey, look, so something like this, can we see it in the data center side? And Lisa Su mentioned arguably yes. So I don't think this is going to happen next quarter or the quarter after that, but I would say I'm not a big betting man. I'm a betting man, but not a big betting man. That within the next 2 years, Lisa Su is going to come out with a customer using their IP to generate some form of AI accelerator. And now AMD has two plays in the AI space, one being ASIC solution, which we saw could be 10 to 15% of the market, and then single market shares in the AI GPU space against Nvidia. And those two can definitely drive this company to dramatically beat expectations. Now, some of you might be wondering, Jose, how can AMD beat Nvidia? Isn't Nvidia way ahead of the competition? Yes, but AMD did recently announce how they're planning to do this. And when they, again, this is the best place you're going to find any news because you're not going to hear this from anywhere else. AMD, during this analyst presentation, gave their plan on how to not destroy, but how to compete or become an alternative to Nvidia. The first thing they do is they gave their flowers to Nvidia. Nvidia is a great company, great products, and they are the de facto standard when it comes to AI chips. As a challenger, you have to have a strategy that does two things. The first thing is minimize the effort the customers need to go through to adopt you because they're already using Nvidia. And the second thing is have some form of differentiation, some difference, right? And in forms of difference, let's start with that off. AMD tends to have higher memory capacity and greater memory bandwidth. And for certain things, especially inferencing, that is a very, very important solution. The other type of difference is at the end of the day, AMD solutions are way cheaper than Nvidia. Now, in forms of reducing that friction, how do you reduce that friction? And what is that friction? That friction right now is, if we look back about 12 months ago, if you were running a model on Nvidia, you could probably have been running it at 130% performance. Now, if you ended up switching to AMD, that 130% performance would have dropped to 50% performance. And that's a friction. That's the friction of adoption. So AMD has focused a lot on creating math libraries, on software ecosystems, on frameworks where now if you change, you're not losing that performance. And they have a long way to go still, but they already made a lot of differences where for a lot of random models, now the moment you go into AMD, you almost have that one-to-one performance. So they did reduce their overall friction that they had before. And they're going to continue to innovate. Obviously, NVIDIA is going to continue to innovate as well, but we can see AMD going in the right direction. The next thing is AMD also made the acquisition of CT. And with CT system, they believe that this will kind of contribute greatly into the building of huge supercluster and building these massive supercomputers. So this is a way that in the next few years, they can also continue to grow within this market. So And they also have the networking solution, right? They have the UA link, which is helping them communicate with AI accelerators, very similar to what NVIDIA has with their NVLink. They are working with other companies to kind of create this UA link. And then they have the Ultra Ethernet Consortium to help out combat against NVIDIA's infinite solution, Xfinity. I forget the name and I'm pretty embarrassed about that. But we can see AMD is also working on the networking side, which is very, very important. Infinite band. There we go. Infinite band is what I was talking about. So AMD, while it's still, in my opinion, so far off from NVIDIA, I think the wrong thing is comparing it to NVIDIA. I think the second player here can do really well, can outperform expectations. And I believe the second player, even if you're so far off from the first player, can benefit dramatically as long as you're going in the right direction. And AMD is definitely going in the right direction in AI accelerators with the focusing on reducing friction by being cheaper, by focusing on networking solution, by focusing on full system integrations, by improving their software solutions. Again, they're not going to be the next Nvidia, but all that will allow them to be a great alternative, even if the alternative is a little bit weaker. Now, obviously, there are the other markets which I believe can be bullish, like the AI PC space. I think eventually that's going to pick back up and going to be a nice revenue driver. Eventually, we're going to see the game console also pick up, which is also going to be another revenue driver. The embedded market is kind of picking back up, which is going to be another revenue driver. And like I mentioned, I believe, and I'm not a betting man, but if I was, within the next 2 years, AMD is going to announce something in the ASIC market that would really drive this stock price up. So this is a stock that for me, it's not one that if I was a short-term investor and looking for returns to go up triple digits in the next month, is one that I would buy. I don't invest like that. I invest in the long-term thesis. And I believe at a market cap of 207 billion, this is one that will grow my assets and continue to make my portfolio bigger in the long term of things. Again, this is a market I understand, so I feel very comfortable. And for that reason, I am going to be doing heavy buying. Again, I don't believe Nvidia is going to lose out. I don't think Nvidia investors have anything to worry about. But in forms of valuation, I think AMD is attractive. So take care, have a good day, and see you all next time.